Hello, very good to have your company. For many of us, January is a month of dieting, but people fed up with obsession with weight are joining together to condemn diet fads and food crazes. Does it matter what we weigh? This is Roundtable. And a very warm welcome from me, David Foster. Thin does not always mean healthy. That is one of the key messages from the anti-diet movement. Is it time to ditch an obsession with thinness?
If you are trying to lose weight, you're not alone. Millions of us make January resolutions to shift a few kilos, and according to one study between 2013 and 2016, nearly half of all American adults tried to lose weight. The weight loss market there is estimated to be more than $68 billion. But research suggests 97% of dieters regain all the weight they lost within 3 years, and often add more. That is proof, according to some, that diets simply don't work. And this is where the anti-diet movement comes in, encouraging women and men to stop dieting and reject the idea that thin means better. They say it's all about eating what you want but well, keeping active and maintaining your natural healthy weight. So is it time to forget losing weight and instead shed the fixation with being thin?
And we say hello to the dietitian Monika Siemicka, who believes that most people who go on a diet don't lose weight. Harri Rose with us too, of the anti-diet Riot Club, and author of You Are Enough. And we have Sarah Dosanjh with us, psychotherapist and author of I Can't Stop Eating. Harri, first of all, what is the Riot Club when it comes to diet?
Yeah, so the Anti-Diet Riot Club is a rebellious community, both online and offline, who basically are fighting back against diet culture, which is every single message that tells us we need to change our body to be worthy in this world. And we'll get on to, I'm sure, talk about that a lot more. And the oppressive beauty standards that kind of we're all forced to adhere to. And instead we believe in self-love and self-acceptance, regardless of what you look like.
This isn't just fat shaming, is it? It's about whatever body shape.
Yeah, beauty standards oppress us all, and we live in a society that is obsessed with thinness. Although the beauty trend, as we've seen, does change through time. So it's a continuously moving goalpost. So growing up in the 90s, like I did as a child, it was all about heroin chic and being very, 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 very skinny. And nowadays it's kind of the Kardashian, big booty, tiny waist, big lips. So this beauty standard is changing all the time. But essentially, no matter how much you kind of fit the beauty ideal, that we are all taught to kind of shame and loathe our bodies, and we should always be striving to be achieving this mythical fantasy body, this perfect body.
OK, I'm going to say, or I'm going to ask, would it be right or wrong for me to say that when you were growing up you had a weight problem? And by that I don't mean you were too heavy, it's you had an idea that what you were was wrong, and that was the problem.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, growing up, I'm quite tall. I was always a tall kid, and I was quite chubby. And but I don't really have any memories of liking my body, even as a small child. I wasn't heavily bullied like lots of people were, but I just had an awareness that my body was somehow not good enough from a really, really young age, from primary school age. And where that comes from, it could be all sorts of places. Every single place we pick up a message that says, you have one correct way to have a body. And so by the time I was 13, I went to my first slimming club with somebody else's mum. And I don't blame my parents or anything like that. My mum is of a generation where dieting was the answer, diet pills. And so, off I went to my first slimming club, and I remember thinking, finally, this is going to be how I fix my body. This is how, and so if I can just follow these rules, then I will.
And I'm going to stop you there, because it didn't quite work at that age. And I want to
so
come
off
back
sent
to
the journey of
how
long
you
journey.
fixed
Yeah,
it.
sure.
And you two are both involved in the medical profession. Monika, I'll come to you in a moment, because you work with cancer patients who have a problem problems sometimes because they put on so much weight during treatment. You have to talk to them about what it is right and wrong to eat. But Sarah, also, you are a psychotherapist, so you look inside people's heads, see what's causing the problem. Did you want to do that because you too had a problem with your shape? Can I put it that way?
So I struggled with binge eating disorder for a decade. And for a couple of those years, I was bulimic as well. And binge eating disorder is probably a little less known when it comes to the eating disorders, but it's actually more common than both anorexia and bulimia.
And this means what?
So binge eating disorder is about eating larger quantities of food than what an average person would in that period of time. But the most distressing thing about binge eating disorder is that you feel completely out of control. And this is why dieting is such a problem, because so many people with binge eating disorder, they're trying to fix this problem. Even if we take out eating disorder, people who binge eat are trying to fix this problem with a diet. But what that does is you end up living in a life of extremes. You're in control 1 minute, and then you're completely out of control the next minute. There's no room for this middle ground. And anti-diet does not mean anti-health, but from where I stand and from what I've seen and in my own experience, is that health starts in the mind. It starts in the mind and it starts in our emotional health. If we can have a peaceful relationship with food and our body and our well-being as a priority, that will reflect in our food choices and that will reflect in our physical health as well. But focusing on physical health, for some people, brings up a lot of shame.
Like with Harry, I'll come to you to ask you how you sorted this out for yourself and what advice you might pass on to other people. But you're working, Monika, with cancer patients in the National Health Service here in the UK. But you also have an idea of what other people who haven't gone through that kind of trauma should do with their bodies. And you also, therefore, have an idea of what is wrong with what is happening in a lot of cases. So what do you think is wrong?
Yeah, I think, well, you just made a really important point that it's not anti-health. You know, we're not saying don't look after yourself, don't be healthy. Of course, that's important. I'm a dietitian, so I believe in eating well and moving and that kind of thing. But it's that relationship that you have with food. You know, you're not doing it to lose weight. You know, like you said, that everyone has this body ideal that we're meant to look to and try and achieve. You know, at the moment, it's, you know, thinking that thin is healthy, that that's what we need to be. But for so many of us, we have, you know, all different shapes and sizes. And actually, there's a certain weight that we're meant to be. So if you're following a healthy diet, if you're exercising or moving regularly, and there are so many other sort of health behaviours that come along with that, like smoking and drinking, taking that all into account, then, you know, you will naturally fall at the weight you're meant to be. And trying to change that weight, be it whether you're trying to gain weight or lose weight, is going to be very difficult.
You see, I have an issue here, not a big one, but I wonder whether, in fact, we know what a big problem obesity is in the UK, and it is growing. It is going to be one of the biggest killers. That by putting this message out, that it is wrong, perhaps, to go on a diet and lose weight, then you are encouraging people who have bad habits to continue with those bad habits.
So I think, firstly, we probably need to define what we're saying by what a diet is. So a diet is where you've got a set of rules that you have to follow, that you might have to eliminate certain foods, that we know that when people go on a diet, they start obsessing about food. They stop listening to their hunger cues because they have to eat at a certain time and eat a certain amount, regardless of whether they're feeling hungry then or they're not feeling hungry. And so you tune out of all of that and you forget to learn how to eat. And so what we're saying is you start thinking about what works for you, following a healthy diet, and, you know, we could talk about what a healthy diet is, but not punishing yourself, because, like you said, it's the emotion that comes into it. Because as soon as you start telling yourself you can or can't eat something, you know, you want to eat. You want to eat the donuts because you've told yourself that they're bad for some reason. But there's no food that's bad. It's just when you're
leave me out of this.
And
I mean,
also,
you three talk and I'll just listen.
It's interesting to pick up what you're saying, though, because the kind of wider issue is that we have this fear of fat, and fat phobia is absolutely endemic in every aspect of society. And so there is the myth that not only that fat equals unhealthy, but the stereotype that people in bigger bodies are slovenly and lazy. You know, this is a huge problem because people in bigger bodies are essentially oppressed by society. They get less job opportunities. They don't get. There's a lot of stigma in the health, so that they're often just told to lose weight without actually getting proper medical treatment. There's also the impact on mental health for having so much stigma. So we have to really unpick this idea that fat equals bad. What the science shows that at a very low level and a very high level, then weight can impact health. But in the middle, the vast majority of people, weight is not a determiner for health. And please feel free if you have anything to add to this. But lifestyle factors,
It's
like
the
Monika
lifestyle
was just
factors,
saying,
yeah.
like how much fruit and veg you eat, whether you smoke or not, and drinking and movement are much more important than how much you weigh. And I think all of us here are really advocating for a weight-inclusive kind of idea around health, and we really need to stop this demonization that like fat equals bad, because that is what is perpetuating this feeling of body shame.
So why did it get to the point where fat equals bad in the eyes of so many? Is it the advertising industry, the big food conglomerates? Who sets the agenda here?
So one of the things, I don't think it's any one thing, but I think one of the things that is a bit of a problem is actually we know too much about nutrition to a certain degree. And what I mean is most of the people who come to me with a disordered relationship with food know a lot about nutrition. They probably know more about nutrition than the average GP. So the problem is not knowledge. So then why is it that these people are struggling more if they know more? My theory on it is one of the problems is that when you know this much that we know about nutrition, yet there's still a lot of contradiction in nutrition research, you're trying to figure out what you should be eating with your thinking mind. So you're trying to work out cognitively, even beforehand, right, this is how much I need to eat today. There's an assumption that we need the same amount of food every day, and you're cut off from what your body actually wants. Our thinking minds, they're not equipped to make those kinds of decisions about their food.
Do you mind going back and trying to answer the point I was making,
Of
which
course.
was who led us to this particular point, where, as you say, fat equals bad? The point you're making is that it doesn't. So who led us to this point?
I think it comes from a couple of places. I think, we do know within the health service, if we take health aside in terms of healthy lifestyle behaviours, so again, we're talking about diet, exercise, smoking, alcohol, all of those things. If you're not doing any of those things, then, as in, if you're not eating healthily, if you're not moving, but you are drinking a lot and you are smoking, then your risk of disease does go up, regardless of your weight.
Yeah.
I'm actually looking for a slightly different point here, if I may.
Sure.
Which is not why does the medical profession tell us this, it's why does society tell us this?
So then that's the other side of it, is that society sees thinness as the body ideal. So everywhere you look, TV, magazines, social media, everyone's incredibly slim. I think a really interesting fact that I read the other day is in the 1920s, Miss America average BMI, so body mass index, was 22. So that is in clinical terms, and I know body mass index isn't sort of, it can be problematic, but if we're looking at it as a figure, then 22 is within sort of the health, what we consider a healthy range clinically. In the 2000s, it went down to 16.9. That's underweight. That's incredibly underweight. So it's gone from 22, which we would consider healthy, to 16.9. So why has that happened?
I don't know, I'm asking the question.
In my opinion, it's because we have a capitalist society where and companies have worked out that they can profit off people's insecurities. So the diet industry globally is worth $200 billion. The UK wellness industry is worth $43 billion. Like, people are profiting. They're realising that if we can show people that, they've got a problem, they've got a flaw, and we can sell them a solution, then then they can make money off it. So it's grown and grown and grown and grown, and in my opinion, that's led to a trend of thinness. And I mean, historically, there's all sorts of reasons why thin became beautiful, because originally fat was considered beautiful because most people
still
didn't
is
have
in
food.
some countries.
Yeah, because people didn't have a lot to eat, so it meant that you were affluent if you had fat. And then what happened was that actually everyone became a bit more affluent, and so then fashion had to change because fashion always changes. So thin became, so we're talking.
Yes, I went to Mauritania once to do a story about how they were force-feeding young girls milk to
Wow.
make them fatter and fatter and fatter.
It's like
Then they'd be
culturally, it's super
perfect
interesting.
brides.
Yeah, so it's there. I think it's right. There's multi layers, but I think it's to do with people wanting to make money off people's insecurities, and the fact that we have Hollywood and Snapchat filters and everything, magazines that are perpetuating one beauty ideal.
So, how do you beat that? Let's get your two personal stories. How do you fight back against the idea that has been put upon you from a very, very early age and that has partially destroyed your life? How do you fight back?
I think it's going to be a slow process. I think it's people like Harri on Instagram. She's got a large following. She's putting it out there. We need to get more messages out there. And the communities like Anti-Diet Riot Club, is that right? They're bringing people together to kind of say, look, it's okay to feel like you are already enough.
How did you do it?
How did I do it? So I think for me, I had to get to the point where it was just too painful to keep trying to meet this ideal that society would want me to be.
Mentally painful.
Mentally painful, emotionally painful, socially painful, all of it. And I would say, and I spent like several years in therapy trying to figure out, why do I binge eat? You know, is it to do with my early relationships? Is it this? Is it that? And nothing could change until I got to the point where I was willing to let this go, because we hold on to this idea of being better in some way. Maybe it's part of just like being human beings. We would never feel like we are enough. Harri's book exactly, I think, addresses that, this idea that you are enough. And there's a movement around this. There's this fear, I think, people think if they accept, nothing will change.
So was there a light bulb moment for you?
There were lots of light bulb moments. I think
then they went poof.
There was a
went out.
light bulb moment for me. And then, because old thinking's powerful and you're surrounded by these messages. So for me, recovery was this sort of quite arduous process where I would let it go, feel quite accepting, and then the old thing would creep back in and I'd
Cold
go
turkey,
back again.
so to speak.
And then, so it was just this constant resetting of intention.
Okay. You are enough.
Yes.
And you said to yourself in your late 20s, we left this story when you were what, 13 at your first diet meeting. In your late 20s, you said, enough is enough.
It's interesting because people don't talk enough about how dieting affects your mental health, and are very similar. I really resonate. You know, you just get to the point where I had been 10 years of yo-yo dieting, which is actually much more detrimental to your health. But yo-yo dieting, falling off the wagon, being like, this diet's one, so many different diets. It also led to binge eating disorder, which is what I had as well, thinking that there was something wrong with me because we see all these pictures, before and after photos. It's like, they can do it. God, I was obsessed with diet magazines and just being like, God, why can't I be this person?
How did you do it in the end?
Well, it's the same. You get to a point where I just stripped out everything from my diet, and you eat really weird things that you're like allowed. Like I was like family-sized cottage cheese, which is just a bizarre thing, and very little else. And I was exercising, and I didn't even. I think it's really important to note that we are actually weight normative people on this panel. You know, we can function in the world without really having to worry about how we exist in the world. And so it's no wonder my weight plateaued, because there was literally nothing wrong with me.
So, therefore,
What
is
did I
it...
do? Yeah, what did you...
No, I'm going to say, was it that you both got to a certain age, you'd grown up?
Well, I mean, it's an interesting point, because I don't think that necessarily is the case. I think we're quite lucky that we had this epiphany very young, because there's people throughout their whole lives.
Yeah, I don't think it's particularly related to age. I think it can be...
Not maturity or anything like that?
I think you can be very young, you can be much
then...
older. No, I've certainly had patients in clinic who are much older, who still struggle with it.
Let me ask you a personal question,
Yeah.
because these two have fronted up about eating disorders.
Yeah.
Did you personally ever have a problem?
No,
So
I consider
understand?
myself very lucky.
Do you understand where other people are coming from?
Yes, I mean, obviously it's slightly different, because if you haven't been in those shoes, then, you know, you're coming from it from a different angle. But of course, I can understand how difficult people have found this, and I do think it's unfair. And I think from, you know, being a health professional, when someone walks into my clinic room, I'm not going to judge them based on their weight. That doesn't even come into it. I certainly wouldn't expect to, you know, sit down with someone and say, you need to gain weight or you need to lose weight. You talk about their lifestyle behaviours and you take it from there. And also you ask them what they want to achieve. And, you know, I know you were saying that lots of people know too much about food. I think that also sometimes comes down to the area that you're you're in. So there are some parts, you know, in London or in England that people don't perhaps particularly understand what a diet should hopefully look like. And so it's just about education, but not like you must do this, you must do that. It's let's work towards this. Why don't we aim for this? You know, the average adult eats 3 portions of fruit and veg a day. You know, let's talk about how we're going to get that up to 5 a day, but in a manner that's not difficult and not forced upon people.
Yeah, I think that for me, the focusing on kind of diet, whether or not to go on a diet, is a bit of a red herring in a way, because we have all this research now. Like, if diets worked, then we would all be thin, because being thin in this world is much easier than being fat or in a bigger body, however you want to self-define, because of this fat phobia. And so for me and the Anti-Diet Riot Club, we really want to kind of shout about, like, there are structures of essentially like oppression that are oppressing women, and not just women, actually. It's interesting to have a white man behind us, but it's that the beauty standards oppress us all, and they really distract us from living life.
You're not going to change that, are you? You're not going to change the pressures of capitalism, as you put it.
Why?
I don't think you're going to be able to do it, because they're out there and they've got billions as opposed to a few hundred followers.
If everyone just suddenly turned their back on diet culture, so buying
Well,
into
imagine
the
if
industry,
everybody decided not to drive a car tomorrow. I mean,
Yes,
it's
I
just
know.
not going to happen, is it?
But we're moving
Sorry, I'm not
towards
leaving
that.
you out.
That's okay.
And
that's
also,
okay.
we have to. The NHS released a report recently that said that that there has been a 37% increase of eating disorders in the last 2 years. And girls from 10, a third of them now say that what they look like is the most important thing in the world. Like, this is a very, very serious. I feel like talking about kind of healthy eating is a slight distraction from the wider seriousness of these messages that say we have to change our bodies, and we have this whole next generation coming up with social media, you know, Snapchat. Love Island is the most popular show on television, which is definitely not as innocent as it seems.
It doesn't seem in the slightest bit innocent.
If
And
you know
I've
what I
never
mean.
watched it.
In the sense of, you know, last year that they got called up because they had breast augmentation adverts were shown in the streaming, not on television, but if you were watching on a tablet, you got shown an advert for essentially having a boob job. Why are those companies choosing that particular time to advertise
Pretty
to
obvious,
those
isn't it,
people?
though, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So we really have these. It's a wider topic, I think.
Get inside the head, which is what you do on a daily basis, of people who genuinely want to lose weight because they believe they are unhealthy, and it's quite possible that it would be good for them to do so. Listening to a conversation like this, in which they're being told, actually, you should just accept what you are, just get on with it. But how do you get inside the head of somebody? Because there are two sides to this coin, aren't
Of course. And let's take somebody who's been struggling with their weight most of their life. Let's say that they were bigger as a
making them
child.
miserable.
It's making them miserable, absolutely. But to change oneself is huge. And it comes into all these bigger kind of existential subjects, if you like, which is what I deal with, around identity. These are people that, like, every time they've tried to diet, it's resulted in failure. You know, we get stuck in these destructive, compulsive cycles. Most people can relate to that on some degree, even if it's not around food. But for some people, food has become the destructive cycle. So in order to change, we need to change the way we feel about food first, and how we feel about our body, because that releases us to think differently. If we're having the same emotions, the same thoughts are going to come up again and again, and we get stuck. So one of the ways I work with it, which I believe in so much, is I run therapy groups for binge eating. People, again, because of this culture out there that's saying, you should be able to just do look at this person who lost weight. You're obviously not trying enough. You need to try harder. That's the answer.
Do you tell them
And
to take
people-
more exercise sometimes as well?
And people, I don't tell them to do anything. They know this stuff. They know the health-promoting behaviours. My job is to help them understand why they're still doing it. But what happens in the group is, so people are very ashamed about binge eating. They're very ashamed about overeating, and they beat themselves up a lot when they do
We
it.
don't have very much time left, and it's a debate that will carry on way beyond the walls of this studio. But do you tell people, OK, look, one way you can solve it is by eating properly, of course, but also by taking more exercise?
But
I'm asking Monika this one just because she's
it's
the
an interesting
dietitian.
question that you've posed there.
Okay, we've got a minute left.
a minute. So
wow.
firstly, what I will just say quickly about diets, in terms of when you look at the literature, is we know they don't work. So we know that the majority of people who go on a diet won't lose weight. And of those who do lose weight, within a few years, they have regained it and possibly gained more.
All right, we'll go down a different... Therefore, are you natural fatty, a natural thinny, a natural middler?
Genetic,
You've got to just say that's it.
You have a genetic preset weight. And as hard as you try to change that, is going to be difficult. So we're not saying, I think the difficulty here is we're not saying just let yourself go and do whatever you want. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is develop a healthy relationship with food and with your body.
Okay, which sort of covers the exercise thing, and I'll give you final word, Harry.
I would say you cannot hate yourself into love. You have to develop a healthy relationship with yourself, and from that you're able to make better choices around food and exercise. It's much easier to take care of yourself if you actually like yourself, so that's the place to start.
Thank you so much. Monika, Harry, Sarah, thank you for coming on. Thank you for watching. We appreciate your company every time we're here on Roundtable. From me, David Foster, from the team. Once again, thank you. See you next time. Bye-bye.